we'll keep it live, that's right. From Pennsylvania to across the globe, it's time for the Steelers All-Star Show.
Welcome to the Steelers by the Lake podcast. My name is James Strong, joined once again by my co-host, Nick Pretzel. Nick, how are you doing on this chilly Saturday morning?
It is a chilly Saturday morning, and James, I'm just hoping that Christmas comes a little early for the Steelers this week with a win over the Detroit Lions. I'm trying to channel my namesake for those of you who are on the visual side of things for the show. I've got my Santa hat on, so we're Steelers Saint Nick this week, hoping that we can see our Pittsburgh Steelers take down those Detroit Lions and get just a little further ahead in that playoff push that they're trying to make. James, how are you this chilly Saturday morning?
Doing good, man. For the first time, I got a blanket on my lap. It is cold in my basement. If you're from Pennsylvania or the surrounding area, you're familiar with basements. If you're from the South and you've never been in a basement, it's always like 10, 15 degrees colder than your upstairs is. So just kind of what we're dealing with these days, but it's the best way to have a quiet environment for all of you to be able to hear me when I'm doing this. So, yeah, exciting though, man. Exciting. Pittsburgh's on a roll at the right time. There's a lot that's very reminiscent of previous seasons that things have gone well late in the year. If you can continue this roll, carry some momentum possibly into the playoffs, you might be able to make some noise. I don't know. I'm optimistic though, Nick. I'll tell you one thing. Place that you should go to make some noise is the Edinburgh Hotel Bar. Especially with this game coming up, 4:25 kickoff on Sunday. That gives you plenty of time to go to church or do whatever you do in the morning, get your regular routine out of the way. Go to the Edinburgh Hotel Bar, watch this game at 4:25. You won't regret it. Steelers by the Lake is in part supported by the Edinburgh Hotel Bar at 100 Meadville Street in downtown Edinburgh, with a full menu including daily lunch and dinner specials and a family-friendly, smoke-free environment. Details are available at 814-734-5103 or online at edinburghhotelbar.com. The Edinburgh Hotel Bar, where you had me at hotel.
James, I think I'm gonna crack one to that. It's a soda. Don't worry, everyone. You don't like we've said before. You don't need to limit us on Facebook or anything. But love the Edinburgh Hotel Bar. Gonna get myself a little bit of juice this morning to get us started on this exciting preview show, James.
Absolutely. And some of this excitement starts with all kinds of transactions, comings and goings this time of year. You're trying to balance that back end of the roster to make sure you have everybody you need for game day. So Pittsburgh did make some moves early on in the week here with signing Trey Sermon, the running back to the practice squad. Also, John Rhys Plumlee returning back to the practice squad. Plumlee runs the scout team offense as the quarterback a lot of times, helping to simulate an athletic quarterback on the opposing side of things. So they typically like to have him on the practice squad during Ravens week. Having him previous to that means maybe they would just like to have him around for a little bit while longer. So don't hate seeing him come back onto the practice squad here. One move that happened after that, the Steelers did sign Jeremiah Moon off of the Panthers practice squad. This is an outside linebacker who's played for the team previously, so he's got some experience with us. He blocked a punt for us a couple of years ago, so a guy with some athleticism and a length, a good special teamer, just doesn't really give you a whole ton on the defensive side of things, but Pittsburgh's a little bit banged up at outside linebacker right now.
Yeah, and it's a guy that we're familiar with. He's been on the team before. I believe he was also on the Ravens practice squad at one point in time. So he's familiar with AFC North football, which is huge to have when we're so thin in the outside linebacker room right now with Nick Herbig showing up on that injury report, which we will get into a bit more later. Yeah. And as we were discussing at the beginning of the show, James, some of this might be future contracts we're looking to with the season kind of coming to an end here, depending on how successful we are in the playoffs. I learned a lot from talking to this guy over here. He teaches me a lot about football. But we were having a bit of a conversation beforehand in that some of these moves might be to sign some of these guys for futures contracts to have them on the practice squad for the 90-man roster going into next year. So if you're like me and you didn't know that, thank Mr. Strong over here because he's a wellspring of football knowledge, and he's bringing it to you on this podcast.
Yeah, so not uncommon for like the second the season is over for the team to sign a bunch of guys to futures contracts. And that's because you only need 53 guys during the regular season, but 90 in that off-season roster. So you'll start seeing some of that sort of thing happening. In order to make room for Jeremiah Moon on the 53-man, they had to eliminate somebody. That odd man out was Broderick Martin Rhodes, which is kind of disappointing for me, but he was a healthy scratch the last 2 games. So I guess he didn't show enough to be able to get some playing time over top of Logan Lee or Esezio Tomewo. Kind of a different guy anyway, a little bit more of a nose tackle type than he is a defensive end type. So that kind of would have been the play for him. Unfortunately, he ends up getting claimed by the Raiders through the waiver wire process. So being that he was claimed on that process, I don't think there's the same restrictions as signing somebody off of a practice squad. So they don't necessarily have to keep him for an extended period of time. But I would expect the Raiders, with that franchise being as lacking in talent as they are, to hang on to him to try to get him onto the roster next season.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. And I think that a part of it wasn't really, I think, Martin Rhodes' production, as he didn't have much of a chance to get out there and do it. But as you mentioned, he's more of a nose tackle, which isn't really where we're lacking at this point in time in terms of what we were dealing with in injuries. And then seeing how Otomewo went out there and was able to put some good tape out when it was garbage time against the Dolphins, just kind of shored him up on the roster for at least this year. So that to me is more of where the Martin Rhodes transaction came in. Was this is a guy who we don't really need in this moment, and we're trying to make a push. And we're hurting at other positions, which is why they brought in Moon, and then also brought in another transaction. We had Cal Adamatis. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but we had a bit of a conversation about this young man here, James, before the show started, because we found out he was originally signed by the Bengals after that disaster of a overtime game where they missed a couple field goals, we missed a couple field goals, and that ended up leading to a victory for us. But as we know, long snappers matter, and we brought him to the practice squad for a reason. Cutting linebacker, and I'm going to let you pronounce his name. I'm channeling my inner Cody here, and not even going to try.
I'm going to say it's Kanai Mauga is my guess on the linebacker. He's not been somebody who's been elevated this season, so not something too concerning there. But the long snapper being brought in. As Nick mentioned, the whole reason we have this bit on this show about long snappers matter is because in that game, the Cincinnati Bengals starting long snapper was injured and they didn't have a backup. So they were forced to go for 2. The performance of whomever filled in was awful, and it cost them the game. So Pittsburgh has prided themselves in always having someone on the roster who can act as an emergency long snapper. This season, it's Logan Lee. Logan Lee has made sure to get himself some reps as a backup long snapper in the offseason, in the preseason. He always reps that a few times to make sure he's still comfortable doing so. But if we're in that situation where Christian Kuntz can't go, which is a possibility, he did show up with a knee injury this week on the injury report, and it looked like it happened midweek on him. If he can't go, expect Cal Adamatis to be signed up to the 53 elevated for the game. It appears as though he's the one that the Bengals brought in to fix the issue after that catastrophe versus the Steelers. So
it does also say in the transaction here that when they were going a bit into his experience, that he played 4 games this year with the Philadelphia Eagles. So he does have some experience across the league. He's done it for a little while. And we mentioned this when we were discussing it before the show too. It's not the Dylan Cook situation from last week where a guy has to come in having never really started a game before. So not that Dylan Cook played poorly in that situation. We were very impressed with him, and hopefully if he gets the nod again this week, which we'll get into here soon as we're about to dive into this injury report, hopefully if he gets the nod, he does the same. But if Adamatis needs to be out there, you feel a little more comfortable knowing he's got some game experience under his belt, especially having some in this season in addition to having been around since 2022. So,
Absolutely. So the injury report that you just mentioned is going to be a real important one this week. We've got some
Absolutely.
guys that are still out from last week, starting off with significant ones like TJ Watt, unable to practice this week with that lung injury, unfortunately. He was back at the facility this week, so it steps in the right direction. I'm not surprised that they didn't play him yet this week. It was rumored to be a possibility of him maybe being able to play. I'm sure they're going to play this as safely as possible and not rush him back onto the field. So no TJ Watt for this upcoming game. Also, no James Pierre, still out with that calf injury. So that kind of stinks. That is going to kind of lessen your depth at the corner position, which is a little bit risky going against the Detroit Lions because their wide receiver core is very, very talented. Christian Kuntz, we just spoke about with the knee injury. It popped up on the Thursday report. He was not on the Wednesday injury report. He's been limited all week long, so he is practicing to a degree. That means he's going through some simulation, but is not a full participant in practice. It's completely up in the air. They have him listed as questionable. We have no way of knowing whether or not he's going to be ready for the game, but we're glad they at least have Adamatis on the practice squad now as an emergency plan in case he can't. Nick Herbig did get some practicing in this week. He was a limited participant Friday. Previous to that, he was a do not participate all week long. So is he moving in the right direction? Yes, but it is a hamstring injury. They are listing him as doubtful for the game, which most of the time, unfortunately, means they won't play. So I would expect to be down both TJ Watt and Nick Herbig in this game. Also, Isaac Seumalo unable to practice this week with that tricep injury and is listed as out for the week. But some of the other guys that we were worried about coming into this game, clearing that protocol, clearing injuries, and will be available to us this week, Nick. So really good news on the front as far as Andres Pete. He's got no injury designation for the game. So it looks as though he has cleared concussion protocol, which is fantastic. Cam Hayward was a full participant. Derek Harmon all the way back from his knee injury. Apparently there was a conversation with him had by the media, and he was disappointed that he wasn't allowed to play last week. But Mike Tomlin erring on the side of caution, giving him that extra week to heal up, probably anticipating it being a little bit tougher matchup this week than last week, and knowing they would need him. He'll be back for us. Zach Frazier had a tricep injury this week, and he's going to be playing, so that's a nice thing to see as well. Jabril Peppers back from his illness. Kyle Duggar had a personal day, but seems to be all the way recovered. Skoranek being a full participant, although he's got that hand injury, still had it. Last I knew it was a thumb. He might have broken his thumb and still played last week, which is just incredible that this man is out there as a gunner and playing all the tush-push calls, right? Because his only offensive snaps last week were all on tush-push, which we have learned is now called the Spartan because of Connor Hayward going to Michigan State, where they are the Michigan State Spartans. So they named their tush-push the Spartan, which I think is really cool.
Ben Skoranek is just a Steeler. He has that mentality, and this is what we've been missing for so long. I'm so glad to have him. You want those guys who are going to go out there and have the team first mentality. Where we talked about the DK play a couple weeks back, where DK was running as a gunner because he pulled Skoranek out. So Skoranek pulls another guy out because he's like, well, the game's on the line. I'm not going to not be on the field. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to contribute. So, yeah, no, I love the Skoranek mentality. I'm so glad we have him, and I hope he's a Steeler for the rest of his career. One other thing I did want to bring up, Pete did not log a full participation practice yet. He did just log a limited on Friday. So it looks like today's practice, which unfortunately we don't have as we're recording this Saturday morning, will really determine his availability. So we may see more Dylan Cook, which I wouldn't mind. I loved what we saw from Cook last season, or not last season, last game. And if we can see that out of him this week against Aiden Hutchinson, and then potentially next week against Myles Garrett, we might have an answer at tackle for the foreseeable future. And that might answer the Broderick Jones question of, do you bring him back on the fifth-year option? So we'll see what happens there. But his practice designation today will really be our guide to see if he's going to be able to go for this week.
Yeah, and it's tough to say because they typically need a full participation day, but they don't have them listed as a game status, which usually means they've cleared protocol. So I don't know exactly where this stands on that, but it looks promising for Andres Pete. I'm with you on this 100%. I'd like to see Dylan Cook start at left tackle, especially if we see we've got Isaac Seumalo out. Pete kind of makes a little bit better guard than he does tackle this stage in his career. So maybe you put Cook at left tackle, Andres Pete at left guard. Frazier's good to go, and then you're still able to use Spencer Anderson as that sixth offensive lineman / tight end, which has been very effective for Pittsburgh. So I would like to see them be able to keep him free for that position because he has been so good at it for us.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to talk about on any of these other injuries before we kick over to the Lions injuries?
No, I think I'll just kick us on over to the Lions injuries. It looks like they've got a decent long list here as well. Their game status lists Taylor Decker as questionable with a shoulder. Kirby Joseph, starting safety, is out with a knee injury. Offensive lineman Tristan Colon, which is a funny name, is questionable with a wrist injury. Giovanni Manow, who's listed as a tackle, is out with a knee. Defensive back Amick Robertson is questionable with a hand. Guard Christian Mahogany, I believe is how that's pronounced,
Absolutely.
is questionable with a fibula injury. And then center Graham Glasgow is questionable with a knee injury. So pretty banged up on both sides of the ball here. And I believe, James, you were alluding to there being some further issues in the secondary with some of those guys there.
Absolutely. Beyond this, there's guys that aren't going to be playing. So the other starting safety for them is out. And then their number 2 corner also out for this game. I think some of those guys have already been moved to the injured reserve, which is why they're not showing on this injury report here. And as far as some of these guys, like, say, Graham Glasgow, for example, their center, he was a non-participant on Friday. So they list him as questionable, but he hasn't even participated. So that's a really bad indication for where he is as far as readiness for this upcoming game. So they're a banged-up team, too. Pittsburgh's banged up. Detroit's banged up. And a lot of it is in similar areas, where for us, we are missing a starting corner. They're missing a starting corner. They're missing both starting safeties. We're missing both starting outside linebackers. They're missing some offensive linemen. We're missing some offensive linemen. So it's not really unfair in one way or another as far as these injuries. It's pretty well balanced between the two teams. They're both going to be missing a lot of players in this game.
Absolutely. And us being a little more plugged into the Steelers, I feel a bit more confident in our backups. I'm not as well versed in the Detroit side of things, so I'm not sure what caliber of the same sort of Tomlinism of the standard is the standard they have over there, where their guys that are backing up can kind of plug in at that same level. The biggest worry for me is if we have to have Jeremiah Moon out there. I'm not as confident on his defensive play as I am on his special teams play. And hopefully Jack Sawyer can contribute. And luckily Alex Highsmith is enough of a game wrecker in his own right that he should pull some extra attention and leave Jack a little more free to run. And hopefully take advantage of their banged up offensive line. Because if the caliber of play drops and we can get Jared Goff off his game, this will be a bit easier of a scheme for us to run.
Yeah, and as you're about to hear here, you're going to see where these injuries really pile up for the Detroit Lions and what kind of matchups we're going to be looking at. So going over the Detroit Lions depth chart on the offensive side of things first, obviously everyone's familiar with their quarterback, Jared Goff, a very high-quality quarterback, more of a pocket guy, not a big scrambler, but a very accurate quarterback, a tall guy who can see the field very well, very precise thrower of the football. You better get him under pressure. If you leave him back there with no pressure, it's going to be a problem. He'll pick you apart.
Especially with some of these wide receivers that they've got there.
Yeah.
We've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I'm sure everyone's relatively familiar with. star wide receiver who's also lined up opposite of Jameson Williams. So there are no slouches in this wide receiver room here. They've also got Khalif Raymond. They list themselves as a 3 wide receiver team, which is not uncommon, but we're more familiar with Pittsburgh as a 2 tight end team, at least in recent years. So we don't line up in that formation as often as they do. Backing them up are a couple guys that you probably won't hear of unless one of those guys goes down. They've got Tom Kennedy, Dominic Lovett, and Isaac Tesla, who was a draft darling of one of mine. He's been contributing in some meaningful ways when either of those guys are off the field. So just a guy to be aware of on that roster as well. Their tight ends are listed as Shane Zylstra, and Anthony Fursker is backing him up. And then just quickly going over the offensive line, and then we'll go to what I think is the biggest threat here. You got something to add?
No, yeah, you're good.
Okay. Going over the offensive line, Taylor Decker is listed as left tackle. Left guard is Kayode Awosika. I tried. I really tried. Center, Graham Glasgow, who we mentioned has the injury there. He's backed up by Tristan Colon, who I believe also they mentioned had an injury there. So very, very, very thin at center, which is something we should hopefully be able to take advantage of. Right guard Tate Ratledge was another guy I was following out of the NFL draft. He's backed up by Michael Neese. And then right tackle is Penei Sewell, whose name everyone should know, Pro Bowl tackle for the Lions here. And then last but not least, leading us to the running back room, where I think some of the biggest threats on this team are, we've got Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery backed up by Sione Vaki. So a very potent offense here, James, that we're going to be going against here. But as we mentioned with the injuries and the attrition they've gathered on the offensive line, I'm hoping we can put up a similar tape to what we did last week and be able to kind of stuff that run and maybe get some pressure onto Jared Goff to get him a little off his game so he can't make as good of a use of these star receivers.
Yeah, so huge matchup concerns here going all over the place. First off, you mentioned the injuries at center. Their starting center really hasn't practiced all week long. Backup center also injured. So that's an area of this offensive line that can definitely be attacked. Jack Sawyer's got an impossible matchup this week. He is going to be one-on-one with Penei Sewell, who is thought of by many to be, if not the best offensive lineman in the NFL, easily a top 5 offensive lineman in the NFL. Highly talented, huge, very athletic, very strong. There's no weakness to Penei Sewell's game. So Jack's really going to have to bring his A game just to not get bullied around in this. Just to create some stalemates will be a big win for Captain Jack in this game. On the flip side of Taylor Decker, also a very skilled offensive tackle in his own right. So not an easy matchup for Highsmith either, but Highsmith has won in some very difficult matchups on this season. So wouldn't be surprised if he still has some success. This wide receiver core is a very, very concerning group to me. And to kind of highlight the guy that you had highlighted in the pre-draft process, Isaac Tesla, was somebody that they traded like 3 picks to go up and get. They sacrificed like all their day 3 stuff to move up and get Tesla to bring him into this crew. And he has performed well when asked to this season. Maybe the best 1-2 punch in all of football as far as rushing the football here. With Gibbs and Montgomery. They call him Sonic and Knuckles there. So just a very dangerous group that can run past you and run through you depending on which guy's on the field at which time. So this is the probably toughest test for our defense that we've had all season long. And it's a shame that we're going to be down TJ Watt, Nick Herbig, and James Pierre in this game, because Pierre would have been a really useful matchup in this game.
Absolutely.
But it's going to get you a better opportunity to know what you have in Asante Samuel Jr., right? Asante Samuel Jr. had a good game last week, got an interception early in the game that helped turn the tide when it looked like things were going to start going in the wrong direction for Pittsburgh. Offense wasn't doing much. The defense was carrying the team. Asante Samuel Jr. gets the pick. His size and speed might be a little bit better matchup versus Jameson Williams than it would have been for some of the taller, longer guys like Pierre and Joey Porter Jr. So it might kind of work out in our favor to have that matchup there, because he just might be a little bit easier for him to cover that extreme speed of Williams, as I believe Samuels is a faster guy than both Porter and Pierre are.
There's a lot to dive into here, and the first thing I want to highlight is Taylor Decker is listed as questionable for this game, so he might not even go. And if he does, he's dealing with a shoulder injury. So that's something that Highsmith should definitely be able to take advantage of, especially as you highlighted, James. He's been having some great games against top-tier offensive linemen this year. And if you've got a compromised offensive lineman, look out, because Alex Highsmith is going to find a way to utilize that to his advantage. So hopefully a good matchup there. And as you mentioned, it's a good chance to see what we have in Samuel, but also I'm excited to see we've kind of moved Eccles to the nickel corner position a little bit this year. And so being able to see him go out there and maybe get some matchups against Tesla, I think might be good if he's on the field, or Khalif Raymond if they have him out there too, depending on who they're trotting out on any given play. So I'm really actually kind of looking forward to this game, because I think that despite the fact that it's a staunch offense, that we got Derek Harmon back at the right time. He's going to be on the interior. Cam Hayward's back to being a full participant with having had an injury from a few weeks back that had been nagging him. And both of their centers are either out or injured, because Tristan Cullen's dealing with a wrist injury. So he's the one snapping the ball. He's the backup
to Graham Glasgow,
to Graham Glasgow, who's questionable with a knee injury. So if Glasgow goes, he's handicapped with his knee, and then Cullen's questionable with a wrist. So you've got Cam Hayward and Derek Harmon staring at you when you got a center in the middle there who's a little bit compromised, regardless of who's out there. It could be a really good game for the defensive interior as opposed to the outside guys. But I'm excited and cautiously optimistic, especially with the momentum we gained from last game. Watching our defense go out there against these guys. Yes, it stinks to have Watt and Herbig out. Herbig is questionable, so who knows? Maybe he improves drastically today and he's good to go for the game. I believe it might have actually listed him as doubtful.
Yeah.
But hopefully there's a drastic improvement. I don't want them to rush him back, but if he's able to somehow spring back faster than anticipated, it could be a really solid game for our defense if we can make use of some of these injuries.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. This is the week for the defensive tackles and the Pittsburgh Steelers to really show what they're made of. You got a banged up group, and that's the weakness. If there is a weakness on this Detroit Lions offensive line, it's the interior. It's not the exterior. So some banged up guys, some young guys, and Tate Ratledge. This should be a game for Keanu Benton to shine. He's going to have some one-on-one matchups with these centers. Neither one of them is 100% health-wise. They were so concerned about this center position that they tried to bring Frank Ragnow out of retirement. Ragnow bangs a hammy on his return, doesn't pass his physical, and is unable to come out of retirement because of it. So they get right back to where they were before, which is dealing with the same guys that they didn't think highly enough of to continue forward with. Now they have no choice but to continue forward with these guys. And it's been a very up and down season for these Lions. They're 8-6, just like Pittsburgh is. They were expected to crank off 12 or 13 wins pretty easily this year. Dan Campbell has gone from being like clear-cut one of the best coaches in the NFL to a guy who's just going for it on fourth down every single time, no matter what. And it has done what that does, which there's a certain odds and there's a certain likeliness of that going well for you, right? And it only goes well for you for so long before you start having bad luck. And he went through a stretch of like 10 times in a row of failing on fourth down conversions to the point where people were like, okay, how about you actually start coaching instead of just going for it on every single fourth down? Because that's not really coaching. That's just like pretending you're playing a football game on Madden and, oh, yep, I'm going to go for it because there's no repercussions. Like there are repercussions. You do have to think about decisions before you make them. And not just in football, in life too. We have to think about things before we do them. So That's an important thing to see in this upcoming matchup here. But let's talk about this defense for the Lions, because there's a lot of talent in a lot of banged up areas there too. So the edge rushers for them, that's the biggest concern for me. Aiden Hutchinson, an all-pro defensive end for them and their 4-3 defense on the one side. The other side, former first-round pick of the New Orleans Saints and Marcus Davenport, who they traded all kinds of picks up to go get, and then just hasn't had that good of a career. He's been serviceable, but never really broke through to that Pro Bowl level type guy. Starting D tackles are Aleem McNeil and DJ Reader in the middle. They do have a high draft pick in Tyleik Williams and also Roy Lopez backing them up. So they're pretty deep on that interior defensive line group with some big, stout dudes. Might have a little more luck running on the edge than you will running up the middle versus these guys. Off-ball linebackers, some names that are definitely going to sound familiar to a lot of you folks. Jack Campbell, a former first-round pick for the Lions, has had a very good career thus far. A young, tall, long, strong, defensive power right in the middle. It kind of reminds you of like a Brian Urlacher type, where he's a big, tall, physical, long dude in the middle. Alex Anzalone, been in the league and been on multiple teams, has always been a highly effective defender, just has a lot of injuries over the course of his career. Kind of surprised we didn't see him on the injury list, to be honest with you. And then the other side, Derek Barnes, I believe he's a younger prospect at the other outside linebacker, or off-ball linebacker, I should say, position. Going to their secondary, starting corners are DJ Reed and Amik Robertson, and that's because one of their other starting corners is out. Terrion Arnold was the number 2 corner behind DJ Reed. He's out. He's on the injured reserve. He's not coming back. Safety room has Avonte Maddox and Kirby Joseph starting, but Kirby Joseph is out due to injury. Before Avonte Maddox was Brian Branch. He's on the IR and not coming back. So with Kirby Joseph being out, it's either going to be Thomas Harper or Daniel Thomas, whichever one they prefer. Sometimes they just kind of plug guys in there as far as positions without any specificity as far as guys can play both strong and free. I'm not familiar enough with their roster to know which one's free, which one's strong, or if these backups can play both positions. So it might be one of those situations, and then Jalen Mills backing them up. So going to be some faces that we're moderately familiar with. Arthur Maulet's a backup corner for this team. We might see Arthur Maulet at the nickel corner.
We might see him play significant time because Amik Robertson, who they have listed as the starter at the moment, was limited this week with a hand injury. So if he re-aggravates that or is just not putting the best tape out there, it's Khalil Dorsey and then Arthur Maulet. So we might see him get meaningful playing time depending on how this game plays out, how physical it is. What ends up going down could show a different look for us, and they're banged up, as we've already been alluding to. The names that stick out the most to me on this defense are going to be DJ Reed. He's a pretty solid corner, exposable but solid nonetheless. Jack Campbell, as you mentioned, Alex Anzalone, and Aiden Hutchinson. Those are the guys that I think can give us the most trouble on this defense, especially with some of those other guys being banged up, as Kirby Joseph was a DNP all week, as you mentioned. Excuse me. Don't anticipate him being out there, and if he is, it's going to be in a compromised capacity. And that's a huge thing for us because he was one of their turnover machines earlier in the year. So being able to have that sort of ball hawk player who can also be sort of the defensive captain, sort of calling, I don't know if he's actually listed as the captain, but he sort of scans the field and is able to call things out from that safety position there. And he's very good at identifying where the ball is being placed because he was a turnover machine. So him being DNP all week, if he does go, it's going to be
they ruled him out. So you don't even have to worry about it.
Yep. So yeah, we don't even have to. The threat is gone. So it's not that there's going to be no threat. There's still going to be capable guys out there in the secondary, but the top guy, in my opinion, is not going to be an issue or a factor in this game for us. So a huge thing for us to be able to have a little bit more freedom, I think, throwing the ball in this matchup, and that can be good for Rodgers to get the ball to guys like Pat Fryermuth or Darnell Washington, who can then do some creating after the catch, get some yak yards. DK Metcalf, as we saw when he threw Minka Fitzpatrick last week. So we'll hopefully see a lot more of that. I think it's going to be a similar game in that this is a team that thrives when their run game is good, and then the pass game kind of explodes from there on out. So hopefully we can limit the run, force them to become one-dimensional, and then lock down those guys. It's not going to be as easy because it's not just Jalen Waddle that you have to worry about. I mean, last week we had a bit more of a tight end threat with Darren Waller out there because their tight ends aren't any big-name guys. But you still have to worry about Jameson Williams, Isaac TeSlaa, Khalif Raymond. So secondary is going to be tested this week. Hopefully they can rise to the challenge.
Yeah, huge week for them. If they can hold up, then you got a real chance. But that's what it's going to be, a lot of it, is covering these highly skilled wide receivers and not letting them burn you. Because if you have to pull guys off the line of scrimmage, you're just going to get torched with the run. Special teams, before we kick over to our keys to success in our score predictions. The kicker for the Detroit Lions, Jake Bates. Punter and holder is going to be Jack Fox. Long snapper, because long snappers matter too, Hogan Hatton is their long snapper. Punt return duties being handled by Khalif Raymond. Kick return by Jacob Sailors and Tom Kennedy. Tom Kennedy also the backup punt return man. I believe that's one of the wide receivers, right?
Yeah, one of their back of the roster guys.
Receivers, yeah. So definitely something to be looked at there too. Anything else you want to talk about on these groups before we kick over to our keys to success?
I'm ready if you are, James.
All right, let's crank over to it, man. So just two of us today, unable to get any notes from the other two who were unable to make it this morning. Looks like Cody's having some internet issues at his new location, so he's got some stuff to figure out to be able to rejoin us in future shows here. But in the meanwhile, we'll give you what we've got for keys to success. Nick, what's your first one? What do you got for us today?
It's going to sound like a broken record, but I want to limit their top rusher. I believe I said the same thing last week, but they have won, it looks like, one game where their top rusher has had under 70 yards. If we can keep their leading rusher under 70 yards, they seem to become one-dimensional, and they can't seem to get it done. I mean, they did it once, but it was once out of the whole year. So if we can do that, it'll at the very least limit their game in a way where we can then come back and say, all right, we've got that answered. Now we can focus on the rest of it. And I think this is the game to do it, with the attrition on their offensive line, getting Derek Harmon back, having a fully healthy Cam, and Keanu Benton's also back to full participation. I'm looking to limit the run with my first key to success.
Awesome. So my first one is not going to be too dissimilar from that, to be honest with you. So I feel like there's a big opportunity in this game to attempt to make this team kind of one-dimensional and take over a certain area of the field. Doing so, my key is going to be the defensive line, and I'm talking non-linebackers. So this does not include Jack Sawyer or Alex Highsmith, but your Keanu Benton, your Cam Hayward, your Derek Harmon, Asezio Tomeo, Y.A. Black, out of this crew here. Right? We'll include Logan Lee in case he gets some snaps in this game. You never know. I want to see 6 total tackles for loss and sacks combined out of this group. I think they should be able to take over the middle of that football field, stop the run, and get after the quarterback. If you can get consistent pressure from the middle, it's just going to ruin everything for them offensively. Make Jared Goff move. Make him throw on the run where he's less comfortable. If he stays in the pocket and he's able to step into his throws, he's going to complete those throws. He's a highly skilled, pure passer, really. Just as far as guys in the league that are pure passers, that aren't big on scrambling or not really known for creating a lot outside of structure, this is one of those dudes. So I need 6 total TFLs or sacks combined out of that defensive line unit, and I'd love to see some more from the other guys too.
I like it a lot.
You want to do your next one? We'll just alternate since there's only two.
I apologize for the cough. Yes.
You're good.
Let me just clear my throat there. I apologize. I should have muted up there for a second. Yeah, I like that a lot, James. I think getting Goff rattled is going to be a huge, huge element of what we need to do in this game. I was trying to find some further stats on the defense for the Lions here to see exactly what the weakness is of this team. But I don't necessarily know that Pittsburgh needs to play to the weakness of this team as much as they need to play to the offensive strengths of our team.
Yeah.
So I want to see a lot of tight end involvement like we saw last week. I want to see at least 3 catches for Freiermuth and Washington. I don't have as much faith in Jonnu Smith catching the ball, especially after he had 1 target and didn't catch it last week. If they want to make him a halfback again, go for it. But I want to see at least 3 catches for Muth and Washington, and I want to see that combine for at least 60 yards because these guys are reliable pass catchers, and they can really move once they've got the ball, especially if they've got a blocker or two. And watching half the Dolphins defense not be able to bring down Darnell last week just further shored up the thought in me that he needs to be involved on this offensive game plan. So want to see those guys out there. I would love to see some more Spartans out there in terms of getting some conversions on short distance plays, but the key is going to be tight ends for me.
Awesome. So my final one here is going to be protecting Aaron Rodgers. I feel like there's a fantastic opportunity here. There's only one guy on that defensive front who really gets after the quarterback, and he does it at a high level in Aiden Hutchinson. So you need to be double teaming him. You need to be chipping him. You need to be highly cognizant of where he's lining up on the field, but expect him to be opposite of the left tackle almost the entire game. So he's going to be coming at Dylan Cook or Andres Pete, whoever they march out there at left tackle, but give him a little help, slide a guard over to protect him, line up a tight end on that side and chip, send a running back over there to chip, whatever you have to do to make sure that it's not purely one-on-ones, because that's the most dangerous guy. I want to see 1 sack or less, 1 or none allowed by this offensive line in this game, because I think if you give Aaron Rodgers time, he can pick apart this banged-up secondary. The Lions are letting all kinds of points up lately. Lots of yards, people throwing the ball all over them. That defense is very susceptible to the passing game right now because of how banged up they are, being -3 of their 4 starting defensive backs. So protect Rodgers, and he'll take you to the promised land in this game.
I like that, James, especially after watching us go for 4 straight touchdown drives last week against Miami, who also was struggling to cover some of our guys. If we can keep Rodgers giving him some time and do better than we did last week, because we allowed, I believe, 3 sacks in the last matchup. If we can keep it to none, it's going to be a fun game to watch.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the most exciting part of this entire show, right? Score predictions. You're only getting 2 of them from us this week. We apologize, none from our co-hosts who are either unable to join us due to technical difficulties or under the weather. Nick, I'm going to let you go first, man. What's your score prediction for this game? You're the guy that's been the most optimistic of the group so far.
I'm trying to keep that optimism alive. I'm trying to be in the Christmas spirit here. So we're going to continue that streak. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game from both sides. I'm optimistic about our defense, but I'm also trying to be realistic in terms of this is a high potent offense, and they're going to gash you when they can if you give them any chance to. So I'm going with a high scoring game. I'm going to go 41-34 Pittsburgh.
Woo!
I want to see us break that number. That's not uncommon looking at some of the scores here for some of how these games against the Lions have gone. They've put up those numbers. They've had those numbers put up against them. So they're an exposable defense, but they're also a potent offense, and hopefully we can come out on top.
Awesome. I'm with you. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. I'm a bit concerned that Pittsburgh isn't going to be able to create enough pass rush to slow down the very, very talented. This is the number one scoring offense in all of professional football right now. The Lions are scoring at an incredible rate. Luckily for a lot of their opponents, they're allowing a ton of points too. I'm not going quite as high of a score as you, but I'm still saying there's going to be a lot of scoring in this game. I'm going 31-28. I'm taking the Lions. The reason I'm taking the Lions is I'm going reverse logic on here. In the last couple weeks, I've picked against our Steelers, and they won both games. I'm at that stage right now. I'm too superstitious to pick the Steelers. I'm going to continue picking against them. I'm going to have a tough time next week, I'll be honest with you. But I'm going to pick the Lions today in a close, high-scoring matchup, 31-28 Lions, with every hope, and I'll be cheering every second of this game that our Steelers pull this game out. I'm totally just trying to reverse jinx them right now.
All right, boys. Prove me right and prove James's superstitions right as well, and prove him wrong. But we can't thank you all enough.
Oh,
You're muted.
am I back?
You're back. Yep.
The connection cut out for a moment there, but we can't thank you enough for listening. Go ahead and please, if you would, give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Subscribe, ring the bell. It doesn't cost you a thing. Don't forget the 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. Make James and the rest of us here on the podcast very happy. Until next time, these are your hosts, James Strong and Steelers St. Nick, signing off.
Peace.